Welcome to the PAFnow Audit Edition demo. Over the course of this video, I will give an overview and explain the highlights of this audit edition. First, let me briefly introduce you to the process you see here to give a little bit more context. The data you see is drawn from a purchase to pay process. Typically, this begins with the creation of a purchase order, then proceeds to several approval levels. Then the goods are received. Then, a few days later, the invoice is posted. And in the end, the invoice is paid for and the purchase order is done. This is a very typical example for how you would start your process mining journey in an audit project. You would start exploring your process on this very first page, the Discovery page. Additional to the Process Explorer, we find several more visuals with useful information on this page. In the top right corner, we have the PAFnow Duration card. This card shows us the lead time for our selected process. Since there is no selection or filter active right now, we see the lead time of 29 days, 22 hours, 50 minutes, and 3 seconds. This is the average lead time for the complete dataset, which has 968 cases and 79 variants. Down here in the variant filter, we can easily select variants we would like to see. I'll click number 1, which is the variant our process most frequently follows, and then the page filters accordingly so that the Process Explorer displays what that most frequent process variant looks like. The process graph didn't change because the slider on the bottom of the Process Explorer was on the far left side. This means that the process graph already showed us the most frequent variant of our process. When I select a different variant, we will see that the process graph changes accordingly. So here now I will select variant 5, and it changes accordingly. When we think of audit projects, we want to find the exceptions to our common process rather than the norm. In other words, the outliers in these cases and the variants that did not behave as we expected. With PAFnow, that is very simple. Let's use the slider on the Process Explorer first. When I move the slider a little bit to the right, I add less frequent variants. When I move it completely to the right, I see the least frequent variants. I can find outliers by using the slider, or by just scrolling down in my variant filter on the right. Now, I can see that I have unique variants, and if I want to, I can select those unique variants in the variant filter. The page will filter accordingly and show just those. I'll come back to that point with unique variants and how it relates to non-compliant behavior when regarding our process sequences later. Now, I will show how we can use lead times to narrow down from a broad picture to find the outlier cases. Let me move the slider back completely to the left. I want you to focus again on the Process Explorer. So far I've talked about activities, but something else is important to explore. The highlight colors that we use in PAFnow. You see that between Approved PO Level 2 and Approved PO Level 3, the edges are highlighted in green. Because this is a very fast edge, happening in 15 seconds. Whereas, down on the bottom, you see between post-invoice and pay-invoice that it took 12 days and 16 hours on average between those two steps. In relation to the other edges, this is long. Therefore, it's highlighted in intense red. This long amount of time is plausible and reasonable between post-invoice and pay-invoice because we have payment terms and so on. Next, we'll have a look at the tree map in the bottom right to find more outliers. This tree map represents cases and the invoice volume in euros associated with those cases, clustered by plant number. We can immediately see that the biggest cluster is plant 1000. It has the highest invoice volume and the highest number of cases. Watch as I select that plant. The colors in the Process Explorer will change. Remember that before, the edge between Approved PO Level 2 and 3 was green, and the edge between Post-Invoice and Pay-Invoice was highlighted in red. Now the edge is highlighted in red between Create Purchase Order and Approved PO Level 1, and has a little arrow. When I hover over the edge, I can discover what happened or what it describes. This change in color indicates that the average duration for my selection deviates from the average of my complete population. In my complete population, the average duration was 9 hours and 59 minutes. In this selection, it is 1 day and 1 hour, so it is increased by 15 hours and 26 minutes. Not an inconsequential amount. In contrast, we see on the bottom of the process that the average lead time decreased from post-invoice to pay invoice by 3 days and 15 hours. It was 12 days and 16 hours for the complete population, but my selection has an average of only 9 days and 1 hour. Now, I might wonder why it took longer for this one plant to go from create purchase order to the first approval. I assume because we have selected this plant with the highest invoice volume that we probably have different behaviors in the process regarding different invoice volumes. That's an assumption. So now I want proof. What I can do is take my filter from this page to another page in order to really drill down and narrow my analysis when it comes to exceptional cases. I can easily do that by just clicking the drill through button in the bottom corner. Here I can choose any page that I want to jump to while maintaining my filters. I have prepared my assumption regarding invoice volume to be further analyzed on the difference analysis page. So let's jump to the difference analysis. Now, by hovering over a tooltip on the top of a visual, I can see that Plant 1000 is included in the filters, meaning my filter has stayed active from where I came from, the Discovery page. On this page, you can see again the Process Explorer, but with a few different features. Now we are using the all-in-one feature. According to the legend on the top, we have used the attribute invoice volume with 4 bins as our legend. On the graph, I can see the process or variance for each bin of the legend. Since the slider is at the very left, it shows me only the most frequent variance. In this case, the buckets for groups C and D include our most common variance. Remember, we wanted to find out whether it takes longer for different invoice volumes to go through our process. Let's look at this particular edge between Create Purchase Order and Approve PO. When I zoom in, we can see that for Group C, it takes on average 2 days and 5 hours, whereas for Group D, it takes only 3 minutes and 19 seconds. This is again a result which I can narrow down by just selecting the group on the bottom right. And again, taking this filter with me to the next analysis. When I hover over the edge again, we have even more information in the tooltip. We see that the average duration is 2 days and 5 hours, but we also see that the minimum duration is 9 seconds and the maximum duration is 70 days and 3 hours. Now I would wonder if there are several cases that have this maximum, or is it just a couple outliers? How are those cases distributed? How can I find out why this happened? To do this, I will again take the filter from this page to the next page by using another drill through to the lead times page. Remember that we have a filter active from the Discovery page, which was Plant 1000. Now we have Group C active as a filter as well. We also see that the drill through is active. This indicates to us that we have made a successful second drill through. This tooltip I have shown works on almost every visual from PAFnow to show you which filters are active. What we want to do now is find out about the cases that skewed the distribution regarding the duration between Create PO and Approve PO Level 1. This can easily be done by the filters on the top of the page. Just select a source activity that you are looking for, in this case, Create Purchase Order, and then you will select the target activity, in this case we are looking for Approve PO Level 1. We previously saw that the average duration between these two is 2 days and 5 hours. I want to focus my analysis on cases that are above that average. So I will just filter for the durations which are larger than 2 days, and watch the page filter accordingly. Now we can see that we have only 19 cases and 7 variants that took longer than 2 days between Create Purchase Order and Approve PO Level 1. In the table on the right, we can also see how they are distributed. We have 2 cases which took almost 100 days in total. We have 2 cases which took around 70 days, and the rest of them took between 20 and 30 days. Let's also take a look at the bar chart. By clicking it, I fire up the root cause analyzer. Now, I can get a little observation on why our selection is happening. In the root cause analyzer, we prepared the SOD segregation of duties to show whether a process is conforming or non-conforming. We see that in 66.7% of the 4 cases we have selected, the cases are actually non-conforming. Now, I will take this filter with me again to the Segregation of Duty analysis page. There, I want to find out about the long lead times that we found non-conforming regarding the segregation of duty rules and why they happened and where they happened. So let's take this filter with us and jump to the Segregation of Duty analysis page. On this page, we are seeing a little different visualization of our process. So far, we have seen our PAFnow Process Explorer to visualize the process, which aggregates all cases according to variance. The PAFnow Case Viewer helps us to show each and every single case really on the case level. Since we filtered on only 4 cases, we see quite prominently that 2 cases are non-conforming regarding our segregation of duty rules. This happens when the creation of the purchase order and post-goods received were executed by the same resource. The resource accomplishing each activity is simply indicated by the colors we see in the case viewer. When we click on case 496, I can see the swim lanes accordingly. So, create purchase requisition, all approvals, and then finally the post-goods received were executed by the same resource. It's also the same resource for case 496. Whereas the other 2 cases on top are conforming to our rules because the creation of the purchase order was executed by a different resource than the post of the goods received. On the top 2 cases, we probably discovered a sequence compliance issue because the goods received were first posted before the approvals happened. This is something we don't want, and this is something we can then check in the next step. So far, I've showed you how easy it is to come from a high level to find some outliers and to narrow down the analysis step by step by drilling through the report and finding out the cases that are not compliant. Of course, we used anonymized resources, but we see where they differ, where it happened, and who executed it. Let's check the potential compliance issue that we discovered. I can remove the filters by just clicking the Reset Filters button in the bottom right corner. This removes all filters that I kept with me while drilling through the report. After removing my filters, I have the full picture of all my cases. Now I can just click on Non-Conforming cases, and I see all cases that don't conform. When I check the cases regarding the colors, I see again that the very first cases were all executed in the beginning by the same resource. When we go down, we can see something like a compliance issue. In these sequences, create purchase order, create purchase requisition approvals, and so on were posted by the same person, but then the post invoice happened in between them. So now we've got 2 different compliance issues. First, we have segregation of duty issue, and second, a sequence compliance issue. This issue is something that we also can easily check with PAFnow. I'll come to that soon. But before we go to the sequence compliance analysis, I want to show you another page where you can also easily find outliers regarding the variance. Therefore, let's jump to the Variant Analyzer page. We see again the Process Explorer. But now let's focus on the Variant is Unique field on the right side of the page. By just clicking Yes, it fires up the Root Cause Analyzer and it filters down my page on only unique variants. Unique meaning that each case in our selection has happened this way only once in the system. On the Root Cause Analyzer, we can now see that we have a strong root cause for these 29 variants with the material group F6C. When I make a multi-selection with the Root Cause Analyzer, I can filter down even further. Now it shows me only cases that belong to this one material group. When I move the slider to the right, we see a different feature of our Process Explorer using the legend. Now we have the processes visualized side by side. I can really zoom into this process picture and can analyze whether there are deviations that I don't like or which are not compliant. For the first variant, what I see is my process from create purchase requisition, create purchase order, then the approval. At the end, it loops around between post goods received and post negative goods received. This is something which we don't want. The next variant we see is probably an open case because after the goods received, nothing happened. The next 2 variants are interesting because here we see again a compliance issue. But we have seen this on our segregation of duties analysis page already. I see that the approvals happened again after post goods received. These variants only differ because there is a create purchase requisition in one, whereas the other one starts directly with the creation of the purchase order. But as I said, after the goods received was posted, the approvals followed, and then we look back to post goods received. This is something that we really don't want in terms of sequence compliance. Let's next jump over to the sequence compliance analysis to show you how easily you can set it up and then find out which cases are not compliant regarding your sequences in combination with our segregation of duty. On this page, we have the PAFnow Event Filter on the left side and the PAFnow Process Explorer with a new feature, which is the Conformance Check. How does Conformance Check work? I'll show you in just a moment. Let's start with using the PAFnow Event Filter and setting up our 2B model, or our reference model. With this reference model, we define how the process should look. Usually, we build it based on available data. By simply dragging and dropping the activities from this list onto my graph, I can set up my process very easily. I want to have create purchase order followed by 3 approvals. It's probably also conforming if it not only starts with create purchase order, but also with create purchase requisition, or with the creation of a shopping cart. Take notice of the dashed line between events. By clicking on those dashed lines, they become solid. Solid means directly followed, whereas the dashed line means it's eventually followed. So what this means is that the 3 top events must be the starting point if we make the line solid. Alright, let's continue setting up our graph. After the approvals, I want to have the post goods received, then I want to have the post invoice, and finally, I want to have pay invoice. Let's also define pay invoice as the end activity. To do that, I will click on the last arrow so it becomes solid like we did at the top. Remember in this demonstration we have also seen self loops. I can easily set those up in the event filter by just clicking or dragging the same activity to be right after itself. Now, I want to exclude post goods received to remove self loops from our cases. I do that by using the exclude function. When I now go back to the main report view, you'll see that the page is adjusted accordingly when I click the filter. Based on the process we defined in the event filter, we have 487 cases and 7 variants that conform. Now in the Process Explorer, everything is red right now because we haven't actually set up the conformance model. I can easily do that by just clicking the thumbs up button in the top right of the Process Explorer. Then it all turns green. Everything is green because it's what we have now defined as our reference model. I'm going to remove the filter from the event filter to delete the filter from the page, but it will still keep my model that I previously defined. Next, I'll put the slider to the very left for the process picture to become cleaner. Now, let's select variant 3 in our variant filter. Watch as the colors adjust to help us easily find deviations from the reference model in our process. Everything that's in green is according to our reference model. Everything that is gray happens in the path where one piece is compliant and the other piece is not compliant, and everything in red is completely non-compliant. The yellow is just identifying what our model would ideally have happen. In the case of creation of purchase order to approve PO level 1, we have conformance. But indicated with the yellow activities and errors, we see that approved PO level 2 and 3 have been skipped. On the red line, we see what actually happened in our process. I can also easily and dynamically adjust my reference model by clicking the thumbs up in the top right. Now it takes this variant to conform with the rest of my reference model. I can also always easily check my reference model by clicking on the triangle button, and then I can see how my reference model looks. I can also adjust it from here. For instance, I don't like the loop from post goods received to approve PO level 1, so I'll mark that as non-conforming. And I will also mark the self loops as non-conforming. As you see, it's very simple to adjust my reference model. As a final step, let's use the conformance checking filter. I can either filter my page for non-conforming cases or for conforming cases. From an audit perspective, it's more important to see the non-conforming cases, so I'll do that. Now we will see that we have 432 cases and 76 variants that are non-conforming. I'll again drill through to the Segregation of Duty analysis page. On this page, let's click on Non-Conforming. Now we filtered, let's make one last drill through to our Case Overview table. Here you can really clearly see your findings in the table. Right now it's structured by case ID, purchase order ID, the invoice volume, payment term, and so on, but you can always add whatever fields you choose are important to you. On the top of the visual, we can find some options using the 3 dots. Let's use one of these options to export the data as a CSV file for a quick data grab. It's also possible to export this in Excel. I'll save the CSV file to my computer and show what it looks like quickly. As you can see, all of the relevant data and fields have been exported. This is a great method if you need to pass around data in an efficient manner. And with this, I will conclude the demo of the PAFnow Audit Edition. Thank you for watching. If you have any questions, feel free to contact us at PAFnow anytime.